Good evening. And what a change in the weather. And we were sweltering in July. I think we just skipped right over July and we're into September. At least that's the way it feels. But that's very nice, very nice. But was that some kind of rain on Sunday? I know people up in Oxford, and that really got some major. And unfortunately, there's 2 women that got swept away. Mm-hmm. That stream called Little River, from Oxford down to Seymour, it really is a very sharp drop. And then you get all that water. You know, 6 inches of water, you can get swept off your feet in 6 inches of water.
Yes. You got 12. 6
inches of water can sweep you off your feet. Yeah. So anyway, strange. There was earlier this year, there was that flooding up there in Vermont and New York State. Yeah. So I actually had some people, I saw it in the news and contacted me, "Are you okay?" I said, "We're fine in Milford," but unfortunately the people up there were not. So we're in Nehemiah chapter 6 tonight, and we're back to dealing with more opposition to the rebuilding of the wall. Last week, of course, chapter 5 dealt with Nehemiah helping the poor. And he realized that there were some people that were in very poor situations, and he got involved with the people that could make a difference and help them out. But in the end of chapter 4, is where we are introduced to some more of this opposition to the rebuilding of the wall, and now that continues here in chapter 6. So let me open with prayer. Heavenly Father, we give thanks for your many blessings and for your provision for us. We do pray for those people in the western part of our state here that had all that rain and all that destruction from the water, and especially the families that lost some loved ones. We ask your blessing in our time in the Word tonight, and guide and direct us by your Spirit. We'll ask and pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. So next week, Dave will be covering chapter 7. Interesting chapter it is, so that's your assignment for next week to read ahead. But tonight we're in chapter 6. So this is further opposition. It was cited in earlier chapters, especially chapter 4, but now some more here in chapter 6. Further opposition to the rebuilding of the wall, but the walls were completed. The walls were completed. So, we're going to see that Nehemiah was actually attacked in several different phases. The attacks came against him as he was the one providing leadership. So, Kathy, I want you to read verse 1 to verse 4. This is the snare of the enemy's friendship.
When the word came to Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, and Arab, and the rest of our enemies that I had rebuilt the wall, and not a gap was left in it, no, up to the time I had not set the doors and the gates. Sanballat and Geshem sent me this message: "Come, let us meet together in one of the villages on the plain of Ono." But they were scheming to harm me, so I sent messengers to them with this reply: "I am carrying a great project and cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you?" 4 times they have sent me the same message, and each time I gave them the same answer.
All right, Ron, would you read verse 5 to verse 9, and we're going to see here the subtlety of the enemy's slander. Verse 5 to verse 9.
5. And Sanballat sent one of his servants to me with a 5th message, this one in the form of an unsealed letter. It read: "Geshem, tell me that a rumor is going around among the neighboring people that you and the Jewish people intended to revolt, and that way is why you are rebuilding the wall. He also says that you plan to make yourself king. 7. And that you have arranged for some prophets to proclaim in Jerusalem that you are the king of Judah. His Majesty is certain to hear about this, so I suggest that you and I meet to talk the situation over. 8. I sent a reply to him, nothing of what you are saying is true. You have made it all up yourself. 9. They were trying to frighten us into stopping work. I prayed, but now God, make me strong.
Okay. Verse 10 to verse 14. So 10 to 12, Stephanie, and 13 and 14, Wendy. We're going to see here the scandal of the enemy's religion.
Say 10 to 12 for me?
Yeah, 10 to 12.
10. Later, I went to visit Shemaiah, son of Delilah, and grandson of Methabel, who was confined to his house. He said, let us meet together inside the temple of God and bolt the doors shut. Your enemies are coming to kill you tonight. But I replied, should someone in my position run from danger? Should someone in my position enter the temple to save his life? No, I won't do it.
13 and 14.
No, 12, yeah.
12. I realized that God had not spoken to him, and that he had uttered this prophecy against me because Tobiah and Shabbalah had hired him. 13. They were hoping to intimidate me and make me sin by following his suggestion. Then they would be able to accuse and discredit me. 14. Remember, oh my God, all the evil things that Tobiah and Shabbalah had done, and remember Noadiah the prophet and all the prophets like her who have tried to intimidate me.
Okay. Mary Claire, would you read verse 15 and 16? Now we're talking about the completion of the wall, and the wall indeed was finished. Verse 15 to 16.
15. So on October 2nd, the wall was finished, just 52 days after we had begun. 16. When our enemies and the surrounding nations heard about it, they were frightened and humiliated. They realized this work had been done with the help of our God.
Okay. Lisa, read verse 17 and 18, and Diane, read verse 19, please.
17. During those days, the nobles of Judah sent many letters to Tobiah, and Tobiah's letters came to them. 18. For many in Judah were bound by oath to him, since he was a son-in-law of Shechaniah, son of Ara, and his son Jehoihanan had married the daughter of Meshullam, son of Berechiah.
Also, they reported his good deeds before me and reported my words to him. Tobiah sent letters to frighten me. Then it was when the wall was built and I had hung the doors, when the gatekeepers, the singers, and the Levites had been appointed.
Okay. We'll pause. We'll stop there now. So we read through the chapter. We're going to see that Nehemiah experienced different kinds of opposition. And his enemies, they didn't stop. They just kept coming after him and tried different approaches. But he had the wisdom of God to discern, understand what was happening, why they were doing what they were doing, and had the wisdom to know how to respond to it. So let's go back, start at the top again, and see this attempt that they had to get him to come out of the city. Remember, as they were building the wall, he had people stationed around the wall with half the people were armed, the other people had their implements they were working with, but they also had arms. So they were, and they were in a defensive situation. So his enemies were trying to get him to come out of there and come down Actually, this is down on the plain. Joppa, if you know on the map today where Tel Aviv is at, and Joppa is where, remember, Jonah sailed from? This is actually like 6 miles or so to the inland, and it was in the plain area, the town of Ona, where they wanted him to come and meet. So he said, well, why would they want to meet with him? You know, what was the purpose? They were trying to trick him to come out of the city, and they had something bad planned against him. So, Kathy, you read verse 1 to verse 4.
Mm-hmm.
What do you take from this?
Well, I guess,
If you were Nehemiah, and these people said, hey, come meet with us. We want to have something we want to discuss. Well, what would you think?
I wouldn't, what would I think? I would think that they're up to something.
They were up to something.
They're no good.
They were up to no good, and not only did they ask him once,
5 times.
4 times.
Well.
4 times.
Well, maybe they thought the squeaky wheel gets the oil. I don't know. But I would, maybe he should have said, well, you want to meet with me so badly, you come here.
He could have said that,
Could have, but he didn't.
but he didn't. What did he say to him?
He just said, you know,
I'm too busy.
I'm busy.
I'm doing this important work. Why should I leave this work to come meet with you? And they didn't really give any indication. I mean, they had been in opposition. They'd been in opposition coming from the north, coming from the down to the southeast, coming over here to the southwest. The surrounding areas were in opposition to Jerusalem being rebuilt. And the work was going forth. They were making comments before he started. They were making comments while the work was going on. So why would he leave the city and go meet with them? For what? For what reason?
Ambush. The big ambush.
Yeah. But they must have thought they were able to get him to come. Maybe under the guise of saying, now that we thought about it,
Not even an idea.
you're rebuilding the walls, and we initially were opposed to it, but now okay, we're okay with it, and we just want to kind of have a friendly meeting over it. No, wasn't they wanted to harm him,
Yeah, exactly.
and he, of course, they focused on him because he was the one that was behind getting everything done.
Yeah.
He was behind what was being done. So they said 4 times in Barcelona.
Don't forget, they previously had tried to disrupt the job by getting all the people stirred up.
Yeah.
And they couldn't do it then.
Yeah.
He was able to keep the people under control and build. So now it's like, well, if I can't get them to disrupt it, I'm going to get the leader.
But they weren't too bright because they just kept giving them the same message 4 times. They didn't really they didn't say, well, we've changed our mind, and they didn't give them any type of a argument that would persuade him. They just, I guess they just thought they'd wear him down, or they thought they were proud of their own selves and figured that he eventually would cave, but they didn't really offer any thoughtful argument or reason for him to change.
No.
So they weren't too bright.
Or they didn't realize he was that bright.
Me personally, I would not have written them back 4 times. Probably twice. And then
Sometimes you say the most when you say nothing at all.
no answer is an answer. No answer is an answer. Yeah,
What part of no don't you understand?
exactly.
They could have come forth with a white flag, offered to come meet him with him there. But no, but trying to get him to come out of the city, and this is no good.
Send a Trojan horse.
Yeah.
But they weren't too bright.
And, they've given him a lot of trouble before, so why should he go meet with them? Why should he go meet with them?
It wasn't going to benefit him.
So, verse 5 says, for the 5th time, That was you, Ryan.
Yep. Well, again, they wrote there and had to sort of plead what they were hearing and why they were writing to them. But, that didn't sway them anyway, but.
This is the same charge that Dave made earlier, that what are you doing? You're gonna try to rebel against the king? You're gonna fortify the city of Jerusalem? And you're gonna kind of declare yourself independent from the kingdom, and you're gonna set yourself up as king? Notice it says that they sent an unsealed letter. Why do you think they sent an unsealed letter, Ron?
Well, I'm cheating on that because I got it right now. They sent it because in that time frame was that the letter was delivered unsealed, people could read it and have knowledge of and that's what they wanted. They wanted that knowledge to be out.
They wanted rumor.
Yes.
They wanted people to have read. Oh, look at this. Look at this. This is sealed. But if it wasn't sealed, they could look, oh my, look at this.
Yeah.
And then they do it. Tongues would go walking. So they were looking to create havoc and rumors. Yep. And what was the rumor they're looking to create? And they were hoping that get back to the king. Now they're not too bright.
The king gave permission.
The king that sent Nehemiah with the cavalry, all this other letters and thing, and they apparently didn't understand all that. That was actually good that they did, but the king had no problem with what Nehemiah was doing. He came with his blessing, but they were trying to stir up with rumor. It says yours. I like the one translation I had. It said the nations, and yours said the neighboring. What are your?
Yeah, the neighboring people.
The neighboring people.
And the Jewish people. So they didn't think that the neighboring people, and the Jewish people intend to revolt.
According to these reports, you're about to declare yourself king.
Yeah.
You're going to lead the rebellion. You're going to make yourself king. Well, he was a governor, appointed by the king.
Well, I was going to. He had the power and the title that he had from the king.
Yeah.
He wasn't bothered, but he also.
Well, it's somewhat fortunate, as you said, these people weren't the brightest.
No, they weren't.
They weren't the brightest in how they were conducting themselves and what they were even saying, what they were hypothesizing. But it was another issue he had to deal with. Anything else you want to say about verse 5 to verse 9, Ron? I like his response. He says, nothing like what you've been saying is happening. You're just making it up. It's all in your head. It kind of reminds me of some of the stuff I've heard recently from all the various political parties. People are making up stuff. I mean, it's unbelievable.
When they show what was originally said from the mouths on the tape, how can you say it and deny it? And yet, what stops me? They still, when they do interviews, people believe it.
Yeah.
But again, that's prophesied also.
And I'm sitting there, I'll never forget, one time I'm hollering at the TV and my granddaughter was in the house and she said, Pop, why don't you just turn the TV off?
Oh,
Out of the mouth, out of the wisdom, out of the mouth of the Why don't you just turn the TV off? Anyway, he says you're just making it up. Well, that's what some people do. Okay? You're trying to frighten us. Whatever.
Stopping.
But I prayed, he says, I prayed.
Yeah.
Now strengthen my hands. It was not a long prayer, but it was a powerful prayer, a long prayer. God asked God to give him strength. because their hands are getting weak for the work, but I'm praying strength in my hands, and obviously the hands of all the people doing things. So we pray and ask God to give strength and God to undertake. All right, Stephanie and Wendy, you shared your reading of the next section.
Well, first off, I think that he was really smart by not going, for one, because them guys had bad things they were gonna do to him, I think.
Yep.
And yeah, it's almost like they're those people like brainwashed, you know? They told so many lies, they actually believed what they were saying. And when he said, there's no truth to your story, he was smart by not going, because first off, he had the word on his side, and he was sent there by the king. He got permission.
So there was this effort to get him out of the city. That didn't work. Now they're trying something else, and you can see there were actually people in the city that they had connections with, that they were using. And now what's the attempt to do? They couldn't get him to go out of the city. Now they're trying to get him to go into the temple. And into an area of the temple that only priests could go. Anybody else could be executed for it if he did that. But at the same time, this guy's suggesting go in there and lock yourself behind closed doors out of safety. And he's like, I'm not about to do that. What kind of message would that send? I'm not afraid. Really, you can see it. They keep trying different attempts. So you read the passage about trying to get him to go in the house of God and close the doors, and because these men are coming to kill you. By night, they're trying to kill you. They're really threatening you, right?
Yeah.
And what's the suggestion for him to do? When facing this threat, is go hide in a temple behind locked doors. Anything to keep him from being out front, leading the people, doing the work. So, Wendy, read on here. What did you say? What was his response?
He said they were hoping to intimidate him and make him sin by following his suggestion. They wouldn't be able to accuse him of discrediting. Then he prayed. He prayed to God. All the evil things that the two of them have done. Remember, a prophet or prophets like her who have tried to intimidate me.
So, here were people in the city that they had connections with, that they were attempting to use to thwart him in what he was doing. Trying to intimidate him. What's kind of the key to understand? You ever hear that expression, follow the money?
Yeah.
Follow the money?
Mm-hmm.
That was true in Watergate. That's true in a lot of other situations. You want to follow the money. It says he hired them to intimidate me. So what they were looking to get, they were being paid to do this. He prophesied, spoke against him, hired them to intimidate me. So I would commit a sin by doing. What was the sin?
Going in the temple.
Going into that area of the temple. They would do this to give me a bad name, to discredit me. All kinds of attempts here to attack him. First of all, trying to get him out of the city where they got to do some harm. Now they wanted to discredit him. And, you know, a leader, if you don't have integrity, you know, it affects, definitely affects your ability to lead. And Nehemiah was a person of integrity. Yeah. Anything else on verse 10 to verse 14, we see the scandal here of what the enemy was trying to do. He perceived this was not the case, and he was committed to doing what God had led him to do, and not to succumb to their threats and their intimidation. Yes.
One thing, it just seems, it's obvious that this was very important work, or it wouldn't have been such a threat to the enemy.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't be so persistent and doing so many different tactics to stop it.
It's sort of strange to me that, I mean, here's Jerusalem. It had been almost 100 years, at least 80 or 90 years, that the walls were down. And there were these neighboring groups of people, part of the empire. Why they would have been so upset about Jerusalem rebuilding their walls? They wanted to keep Jerusalem in its weak and undefended situation. Yeah. Maybe out of jealousy, just resentment of Jerusalem being in a stronger position again. They were all still part of the empire. But, have you ever worked in a large corporation and office politics? Or maybe not even not a large corporation, but office politics, or in some party or some other group, and somebody looking is being promoted or given something, and other people are resentful for that. Just unfortunate of human nature. And you can imagine all kinds of attacks, but we've seen what the attacks here on Nehemiah were. But it was all to keep Nehemiah from the task that I believe the Lord laid on his heart to go do, and that was to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem.
When children of Israel were in Babylon, it was for like 70 years, right?
Yeah.
Because they had failed to practice the Sabbaths.
When they got carried off into captivity, we believed that God was punished them.
Yes. Was this at the timing of this? Is there any indication that this was like the end of that 70 years, and now they were going to?
This was after that. This was after that.
Beyond after.
So they were allowed to go back, and then some who had gone back had come back and told Nehemiah the situation, and so some more years went by. So this is close to 100 years from when the Jerusalem had first fallen. Walls were down, the gates were destroyed, and okay, so that was through that. Now the wall is completed, verse 15 and verse 16.
Yep, so the wall was finished, and it was finished very quickly, in just 52 days. And then the people who had been badgering him, I guess, basically, became frightened because they realized that the only way that work could have been done was with God's help.
Now, this is kind of interesting that it mentions it was done in 52 days, because when you go back to chapter 4, he talks about how long he was there, and it was like 12 years that's mentioned. Where's this at? Where are you?
number 6, it says that half the wall was completed to half of its original height along the edge of the city.
My point is this, he must have kept records, or he had a very good memory, and of course, operated under the spirit, but when it mentions here earlier that he was there for 12 years, and now it's saying that the walls were done in 52 days.
But was that because that was from the time that he started to have the opposition? Was that the 52 days? From the time?
Was that 12 years though, that he was, what was his title?
He was 12 years that he was governor.
Yeah, they claimed.
So what I'm saying is he had to have written that.
In that time frame, yes.
Okay, and then after that, he's saying that the walls were done in 52 days. So that had to be after like the 12 years.
Or before.
Or during it.
Or how else would he have known 12 years?
Well, the writing was probably after the fact.
Yes, that's on the point. Yeah. So that, and remember when we went around the walls, different people, groups assumed the responsibility of building certain parts of the wall. So it's pretty amazing that they were able to get this done in 52 days. Except, he says, the gates weren't put back up yet. It's one passage here. But this was amazing that it was done in 52 days. And so what was the conclusion? What was the conclusion of how this happened? We're in verse 16.
With the help of God.
And with the help of God. Could we say that about what's happening here in this church, all the various projects we've
It'll
done?
be done in 52 days.
Look at this here. Look at, is this going to be done in 52 days? Or what was the date of when we first started the deconstruction?
It was August 3rd.
All right, then 52 days after that, when should this be done?
So that should be before
September
October
20th.
3rd, the end of September.
Yeah, so you say, well, but even all of this, you have to say, it was God. I was visiting Rick Anderson on Sunday afternoon. Unfortunately, he passed Monday night. His service is going to be in September, sometime in the middle of September over at Calvary Church, and I'll be doing that. But when I checked in, this lady says, "You look familiar." So I told her, "Oh yeah, I remember." So she's part of a church in the community, and she was proceeded to tell me that the situation in that church is pretty bad right now, pretty down. Attendance is down. Very few people, and people that are there kind of gotten up in years, and they got this big building, and it's kind of in disrepair. So I just nicely telling her about what's happened here, and it has to be the Lord. It has to be the Lord. And then on LinkedIn, there was one thing. Guy said, "Well, what's the most important thing? Do emphasize discipleship or evangelism in terms of church growth?" I said, "Just preach the word. It's the word and the spirit that produces life. And if you're preaching the word, you're going to be doing evangelism and you're going to be doing discipleship. But preach the word. It's the word and the spirit. But that's what brings forth. That's what brings forth the work of God to completion or to the end that God desires it to be." And here you have to say this was done in 52 days. But you can see God used Nehemiah. He was a straw that stirred the drink. He got it going. Because so he showed up, and yes, he had the king's blessing, and he came there with the king's cavalry and got the lumber and all that stuff he needed, and he had the king's blessing to do what he was doing. But This all happened because of Nehemiah. But he was able to get all these people to do this, but there's, in spite of that, there was this opposition. But even with all that, in 52 days, the walls were built. The walls were built. And you had to give, obviously the credit goes that it was God that did all this. Okay, 17 and 18.
Okay, that's me, I think.
We got some strange names here. You're going to see another explanation of what was behind some of this opposition.
Yep, so, the nobles of Judah sent letters to Tobiah, and then Tobiah's letters came to them. And since many were bound to him by an oath, because he was connected, through family to obviously somebody in the Jewish hierarchy.
So there were some people that were being influenced because they were being paid, they were hired, and now you see another connection here. There were connection of marriage and relatives that the enemy there had with people that were in the city, and some connection through marriage, who were they going to side with? Who were they going to side with? Yes, Stephanie.
I just have a question that where up above it says they realized this work had been done with the help of our God. So they said they were afraid because the work had been done with the help of God, but yet they continued to not like the idea that all of this stuff was done and they're still trying to cause discord and
Well, there were those that recognized it was only because of with God that it was done, but then there was these other group that they were influenced by the relationship, the marriage connection.
But that also says that they were Jewish leaders.
Some of the Jewish nobles had sent letters to this guy.
Yeah.
The replies are coming back. But then there were those that said under oath to him. Remember we were talking about oaths a couple of weeks ago? So their oaths were through marriage or relationship. That they had that strong connection to this enemy who was opposed to what was going on. But it's just also all what Nehemiah had to deal with.
But I don't like that statement. She's questioning. They weren't total God believers. If otherwise, a situation would have come about.
They were okay with how it was before.
Yeah, right. Don't do change. They didn't like. They liked and were satisfied.
The first church that I pastored, I got there. It looked like it was a wonderful church. And then after I was there a couple of months, I began to get some of the background.
Yeah.
And the church was really very divided. But the people who were connected through marriage were all one group. It was one group right here. Okay? And the ones that were connected through marriage, and they had certain of theirs that were sort of the leaders. And then there was this other group over here, and those leaders and these leaders weren't getting along. And one of the big issues was what color was carpet going to be? Blue carpet or a red carpet? Blue carpet or red carpet? The people were sitting on this side were of one color mind, and the people were sitting on this side. Well, eventually one group won out. One group won out. But the other group were still upset about that. It was still in their crawl. And because of these people, they had sort of like the influence. They were the ones that, they were the lay leaders that had come out on top, and these other ones were resentful of that. And people would come to me and they'd, pastor, and they, under the guise of sharing something that enforce. So I what I said? I started carrying around a 3x5 card. So as they started to rat on somebody else, I said, get my pen out. So I want to make careful notes here because when I go talk to these people, I want to make sure that I don't misrepresent what you said. That pretty much ended the conversation. Because they were all trying to get, the two groups were now, they saw, I was now the pastor. And the groups were vying on who was going to have the in with me. That was who was going to have the in with the new pastor. The other guy had a heart attack before me. I think maybe that's why he got a heart attack, having to deal with that stuff. But, and after about a number of months, I just started to preach, and we had revival, and it seemed like everybody now was getting along. We went through 2 building programs in that 4 years. But when I announced that I was leaving, and now the church was in a situation where they're going to now have to go call another pastor, some of those old divisions, the groups, kind of cropped back up again. And once the authority person was, the new guy coming in had his own way of dealing with it. But that was very insightful. I was a 25-year-old pastor having to deal with that. But so I want to make sure I make careful notes of what you're saying so I don't misquote you about what you're saying about the other people. But it was people who were connected through marriage, and then they were friends of those people. And then there was a church they were divided up just like here. There were these people that were connected through marriage.
Well, you can see the enemy working there. But it's sad, too, because they obviously felt very insecure. Because they had to constantly be, we don't get this right. If the color isn't what we want, then somehow we're not important or whatever. It's just unfortunate that they had to feel so insecure.
Well, I'm thankful that all the stuff we've done here, we've been able to come to a consensus. Even on the choice of the color and whatever else, and people have, and that's because we've been very open about it, giving people an opportunity to share things and say things, and the leadership usually provided something to the congregation. Congregation has been all okay with that. And some questions about how this is going to happen or whatever, but we've been very free of any of that kind of sometimes some of the scuttlebutt things that go on in churches, unfortunately. Because we've been all unified on what we were doing and why we were doing what we were doing. But some people could have a difference of opinion and get really bent out of shape over it. They didn't get it their way. Oh well. Oh well.
So it is.
Moreover, it says they kept reporting to me his good deeds and then telling him what I said. See, that's why I said I started I'm taking notes. But they were talking, they were talking and sharing things back and forth and telling him things and then saying things that he said, whatever. And then he sent letters trying to intimidate. This guy just didn't quit. Did he? Didn't quit. After the wall had been rebuilt, he said, we had the doors then set in place, and the gatekeepers, the singers, and all of that were appointed. So I'll let Dave deal with chapter 7 next week. Closing thoughts on this chapter, opposition to the rebuilding, the various things he had to deal with, the attempts that they made to thwart what he was doing.
Well,
Yes, sir.
he set a purpose, he wanted to do it, and he did a good job standing his ground.
He did.
All this, it seems like a good warrant for today, because there's so much opposition and division going on in our country. But it is encouraging. It's not a new thing. It's been around for a long time. And if we kind of get down these strategies that are used here, we can hopefully in our own lives not be fooled by them when they're trying to be played on us.
Yeah. Why can't I lay my eyes on this passage?
It's 12 years, you say?
Yeah. 20 years, 12 years, 32 years.
They were talking about this.
I would think it's so far. I thought it was right here, but I know that's bugging me.
Maybe it's in 3 or something.
So this was written after that, obviously. He couldn't have talked about 12 years after 52 days. He wouldn't have known 12 years.
No,
Okay, it's chapter 5, verse 14. Well, I don't know if that's the one you're referring to, but it mentions 12 years.
Right, okay, that's right here. I was looking at chapter 4, that's why I couldn't find it, it's chapter 5. Moreover, from the 20th year of the king, when I was appointed to be the governor of the land, until the 32nd year, 12 years. So that's what I'm saying. For him to have written this in chapter 5, and then in chapter 6, he's telling us the wall was built in 52 days, he had to write about the 52 days after the 12 years, right?
I got off on this
I
tangent.
think it could be, but it could also be during, first, that's why I'm glad we found it. Believe it or not, I have it underlined in my Bible.
But he couldn't have talked about something.
But he was there
12 years.
Ago, the governor for 12 years.
Yeah.
But
He couldn't have written that though. He couldn't have written that before the 12 years. He wouldn't have known that. If it was in that first year, in the 52 days, he wouldn't have known that he was going to be in that position for 12 years. So he had to write what he wrote here about the 52 days after the 12 years. So he had a pretty good memory, or he had good notes, or he really was relying, yes, upon the Spirit to bring all this back, that he could reconstruct this.
I think Ron's right. I think it was during the 12 years, because if you look at verse 16 in my Bible, it says, I also devoted myself to working on the wall and refused to acquire any lands.
I understand that, but he mentions the 12 years. So he would not have known that during the first year of that. It had to be, what he wrote here had to be after the 12 years.
In all likelihood, he probably wrote this after the fact. I think a lot of Daniel's was also after the fact.
He
And
wrote it after the fact.
so he's talking about helping the poor. And oh, by the way, for the 12 years I was there, we didn't do it.
Yeah.
And then he goes back to the opposition.
Well, I don't know, that just kind of, something I was trying to get my arms around
Sure.
on that.
Oh, he sure had faith anyway, that's.
Yeah, the Lord was
Yeah,
guiding
the
his
Lord was,
mind.
he had faith and strength, that's what carried him through.
And he didn't take the food allowance that he couldn't take.
Yeah, that, right, I mean,
he's-
there's so many examples.
And he gave all that food every day. He fed all those people every day, right?
Well, I fed 150 people,
Yeah.
and he wasn't taking from,
Right.
he was, so I'm saying, he must have had
Sounds like.
he must have had some pretty deep pockets. He feed 150 people every day. And he lists, the oxen and the lambs and the poultry and the wine. To feed 150 people a day took some resources. And he wasn't relying on the stuff that the king designated, but he must have had a pretty decent salary.
Well, yeah, he probably was well paid. He was a fairly high up person
Yeah.
in the court back in Babylon, so probably did have a pretty good salary coming, and he just chose not to take the food.
Except when he was the governor for 12 years, was he in Jerusalem that time?
Yeah.
So he's still getting paid as though he's in the Babylon?
He was being paid to be the governor.
Oh, okay. So he's kind of like an ambassador.
Well, the
He was a
province,
governor. He was a governor. He was a governor over the province,
it was a territory ruled
the
by
territory of the
Babylon.
kingdom.
So it benefited the king because he was managing it.
So he had a pretty decent salary.
Okay.
But he was generous. And he was taking care of all these people, including people that came in from outside or whatever, passing through.
Well, God honored that through him, but he had the faith. He had the faith in himself, but even his own people, not.
He had you see all the things that he had to deal with.
Oh, yeah, those were, I call them hurdles.
He had to deal with the nobles. He had to deal with the nobles. He had to deal with the enemies that were giving him a hard time, and their connections that had people inside the city. He had a lot of opposition, but it didn't keep him from accomplishing what God had laid on his heart to do. I mean, just to go back there and rebuild the wall was one thing, but the opposition that he had to deal with, it makes it even more impressive to me that it was done in 52 days. But it was because of God.
Absolutely.
Because of God.
Yes.
And everybody had to say that, but that didn't keep the enemies from trying to block it or stop it or hinder it. You were going to say something.
Well, he seems that he was God's man for this job because he had the position and the resources and the authority to be able to be that leader in a certain sense. And he also,
Yeah, well, Dr. Lee Robertson used to say, everything rises or falls in leadership. And certainly with Nehemiah, you can see the kind of leadership that he provided in the situation. So, yes, in closing, prayers for the Anderson family. Pat is the lady that used to fill in the piano playing. They were part of Grace Baptist for many years. They were one of the young couples when I first came to town. They had teenagers in the youth group, and they went to Israel with us. We had enjoyed having them going to Israel. So the people we've been friends with a long time. When we did the Chinese auction, Rick used to run that. So he came the first year or two we did that. You remember he came to that. But the last year or so he's had some health issues. They were planning to be here on May the 5th. And something had an episode that kept him from being here that day. And I think the last time she played piano was last year in January, the year before, last year in January. So his service is going to be in the middle of September. We'll let you know over at Calvary Church, where all of our shoeboxes end up, the collection center. On the way to church tonight, Linda Whalen called me, just an update on Joe. He's going to be needing some other procedures to deal with his situation. So pray for, in God's time, this to get, they got to get the surgeons and the hospitals and whatever lined up, and for this, but just in the meantime, to be with Joe and Linda. They're having to. Mary Ann and Jim. Jim had a really bad fall, and he's still dealing with the issues that came about from that fall. So that's why we haven't seen them. But he broke some ribs and hurt his
Broke bones.
Yeah. So pray for. They might even be listening, but pray for Jim and Mary Ann. Anyone else?
My niece Grace is supposed to leave for her junior year of college on Labor Day, and she has mono, He just got diagnosed with mono. She has fever. She has chills. She's
Mono is a weird disease. It hits people. It really knocks them.
Anybody having mono in years.
It really knocks people out.
Yeah, and so she's very, very emotional right now. She doesn't want to have.
And a lot of times it hits young people. It hits you. What mono is called the kissing disease.
Yeah.
Yes.
Must be a reason it's called that. Yeah, and that's your niece.
My niece Grace.
And she mentioned today that her father's cousin just passed away.
Today.
He was congressman down in New Jersey, served 14 terms. He was running for the 15th term at 87 years old.
I saw that, the news today.
And that's
My dad's cousin.
her dad's cousin. So his children would be your second cousin.
Correct.
Oh. Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, and obviously pray for our country. You know, November 5th can't come quick enough. But who knows what's going to happen after November the 5th. But we've run through other tough things, the Civil War period, the period before the Civil War, and then the Civil War, and then the aftermath of the Civil War. That was not good. Some of you remember the 60s, the Vietnam and the Watergate era, and all the division around that. The one good thing, founding fathers, you remember they asked Ben Franklin, what do you got? Well, you have a republic if you can keep it. And a republic is different from a pure democracy where we elect people to represent us. Okay? But we have division of local, state, and federal government. And then in federal government, you have the three branches of government. And I think the wisdom of our founding fathers is that they were diffused power. They diffused power. The Constitution very clearly sets forth what is the responsibility of the federal government, and it really limits the federal government. But the Constitution said this is what the role of the federal government is. Everything else is left up to the states. We are the United States of America. The states form the union, not the other way around. But in all of this, why we've been able to be, we're going, 246 years, I think. Another 4 years to 250 years. So, but you know, I'm thankful that I'm part of the kingdom. It's been around for 2,000 years. And it's still going to be here when the Lord returns. Even the United States of America is not still here in the same way it is today. We're part of the kingdom. And that's where our real confidence is. But pray about things. I think that's the most important thing you can do is pray. I do think people should be registered. They should plan to vote. They should stay informed of the issues, but pray. That's the most important thing to do. And a lot of other people were involved besides the presidents. So that's why you also need to vote. And that's so, you know, I was thinking this week again about how the early church was part of the Roman Empire. And the Apostle Paul, somebody recently asked me for an article I wrote about the rights and responsibilities of citizenship. And they wanted to know if I could have a copy of that. I said, I wouldn't know where that is. I remember giving that speech, that sermon, I remember writing that up. But I can write it up another time faster than trying to find that right now. But the rights and the early church was part of the Roman Empire. The Apostle Paul was a Roman citizen. And I often thought about, he was there in Philippi, and he informs the jailer that he was a Roman citizen, and the jailer said, well, I had to pay I had to buy my citizenship. And he no doubt had been maybe in the Roman Legion, because a lot of times that's who, when they weren't in the Roman Legion anymore, they got themselves head of a jail or something like that. But he had to buy his citizenship. But the Apostle Paul said, I'm a Roman. But I was saying, what was his proof of citizenship? What was Paul's proof? Not all Jews were citizens of the Roman Empire. Paul was. And valued his citizenship, and he spoke up. He said, "Hey, you can't treat me that way." And by the way, it's thought that he was executed in Rome, but if you were a Roman citizen, you couldn't be crucified. Peter was crucified. He wasn't a citizen of the Roman Empire. But Paul was thought to be beheaded. They wouldn't crucify a Roman citizen. He understood his rights as a Roman citizen. But he couldn't vote for the leaders. We can at least do that. Even if it's a lesser of two evils, we can still vote. We should do that. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we do pray for our country tonight. We're in a very troubled and divided situation. I do pray that we can get through this period of time and we can focus on the things that really should unite us. I thank you that this church, as we talked about how all the good that has happened here and how we've been able to work through things, and there's been a unity here. I just give thanks to you because that's really, we have to credit you for all of that. So we do pray for going forward, the completion of this project, even as we saw here, completion of the walls of Jerusalem. And I do pray for the Anderson family and the passing of Rick, either Pat and the children. Also pray for Joe and Linda, and also Mary Ann and Jim.
Lord, we also lift up Matt, just helping with his flying and what's involved. And we pray for all our families in our church, God. We ask your blessing on each family, every marriage, all the children, and Father, we plead the blood over ourselves and our families and our nation.
Father, I pray for Niece Grace, that you bring healing so that she can continue with her studies on schedule. And I also pray for travel mercies for Ken and Deborah, and that they will relax and renew, and also for Dave and Lisa as they get ready and celebrate their anniversary. And we ask all these things in the name of your Son, Jesus.
And amen and amen. Amen. Thank you. So Dr. Mike Dillon, who was here last year, same time, and spoke. He's a retired professor. He's a counselor, and had also pastored a church. So I remember listening last year. I heard a lot of laughter in his sermon. People enjoyed his presentation, so he's looking forward to being back. And I know that church was blessed by his ministry. So that's what's happening on Sunday. And Karen Thorndike will be playing the piano.